Honorable Simon D. Norbrigger, Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister with responsibility for communications. Also, let me welcome Ms. Shaira Ali, Acting Director of Operations of the Water and Sewerage Authority, as well as the Acting CEO of WASA, Mr. Romain. First off, I wish to thank the board, the CEO, managers, and employees of the Water and Sewerage Authority, the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission, the Telecommunications Services of Trinidad and Tobago, the National Maintenance Training and Security Company, MTS, the Solid Waste Management Company, SWIMCOL, and the Trinidad and Tobago Postal Corporation, TT Post, for activating their crisis management plans ahead of yesterday's adverse weather conditions which the country experienced. According to TNTech, most recent update, there were 21 reported disruptions. However, at this moment, they have all been resolved. Some of the affected areas in Trinidad were Sangre, Chiquito, Mondor, Old Road, Blanchishes, Madras Road, and Biche, and Studley Park, Woodlands, and Bacalet in Tobago. The latest update from the Meteorological Office of Trinidad and Tobago indicates that after the passage of yesterday's tropical wave, the atmosphere remains generally moist and unstable, so there is little or likelihood for impactful weather today. As a result, an adverse weather alert is in effect until 6 p.m. The Met Office advises citizens to continue to monitor weather conditions and official updates. Today's news conference was called to give the national community an update on the status of some of our water treatment plants, which had to be shut down due to the challenges with turbidity at some of our surface water intakes, and why this action has to be taken whenever we have prevailing adverse weather conditions. Our Director of Operations, as well as the CEO of WASA, will explain the difference between surface water and ground or well water sources. This is so that you members of the public can get a better understanding of the challenges the authority faces with its operations during and after excessive rainfall occasioned by weather conditions like we had yesterday and today, especially in northeast Trinidad and parts of Tobago. We also have some graphic and video representation that will help you understand a little better what the authority is faced with during these periods of intensive rainfalls around our water catchment areas, our reservoirs, and our treatment facilities. I just want to advise that the return to normalcy is dependent on the improvement of the present weather conditions to allow plants and intakes to be cleaned, flushed, and return to full operations. Citizens are advised in the meantime to manage their consumption and to conserve water as far as possible. So at this point in time, let me hand you over to the Acting CEO, Mr. Kelvin Romain, so that he can take you through some of his discussions this afternoon.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Thank you, Honourable Minister. First, we apologize for the inconvenience caused to our customers, especially since the cleanup challenges following the rains mean customers are more reliant on a consistent supply of water. Customers affected are from various communities throughout Trinidad and Tobago, namely in the northeast and northwest coast, northwest and northeast regions of the country. We wish to let our customers know that we are working to restore supply to affected areas over the next 12 to 24 hours. Work has already begun in areas where the river levels have returned to normal. WASA is monitoring those rivers where rising levels still present a safety risk to personnel. There has been a shutdown of some water treatment plants operated by WASA, and our supply of water across the country, which affects just about 10% of our supply capacity. The shutdown is directly related to excessive rain, which has resulted in an increase of debris and silt to the pump feed. This has necessitated the removal and cleaning of intake and pump screens to avoid damage to the pumps, which serve as the main process for extracting water. WASA relies on 3 sources of water to maintain reservoir levels and sustainable water supply: river or surface water, ground or well water, and desalinated water. The affected plants, which are located primarily in the northeast and northwest area, are fed by rivers which surface water is more abundant. WASA has redirected from some other sources, namely the Hollis water treatment plant, to some other areas where we would have shut down some plants. While rain provides an excellent source of water replenishment, excessive rain presents a risk as well. Waste, which finds its way into the river, as well as debris and soil runoff, make their way to the pumps and clog our screens at the intakes. This affects suction and efficiency of pumps and can cause major damage to our infrastructure. Although shutting down systems present a tremendous inconvenience, it is critical that we take preventative action to assure a reliable and sustainable supply of water to our customers by safeguarding severe damage to our pumps and equipment. Again, we do apologize for the inconvenience caused. We can assure you that we are working assiduously to rectify all our issues within a 24-hour period and have our plants back up and running and a supply returned to our customers. Thank you.
Okay. Minister, is there anything that you think Zali would like to add? So, over to you, Zali.
Thank you, Minister and CEO. Good afternoon, members of the viewing public. I would like to share a little bit more details in addition to what CEO indicated on the status of our operations at present. At this time, we were impacted by 16 of our water treatment facilities and 10 of the surface source intakes by the heavy rainfall experienced over the last couple of hours. In essence, some of the areas that were impacted across the country, including Tobago, were in the northeast predominantly, in the south areas, in the north coast areas and northwest, and of course in Tobago, several facilities out as well. We are at this time 26 communities overall impacted. Approximately 200,000 persons would have been without a supply as plants, the surface source plants, were taken out of operation. The authority has phenomenally most of our surface source plants, or 60% of our surface source, rely on the rivers across the northeast and the northwest areas. Some of these communities that would have felt the impact include Cora, Lupino, McDavid, Matura, Arepo, Guanapo, Valencia, Sandy Grande, in the north coast areas such as Blantyres, Tyrico, Las Cuevas, La Follette, Rincon. In areas in Santa Cruz, which is one of our hard-hit areas, those intakes suffered severe clogging, and as such, areas such as Pipiol Reservoir, Susconosco, and greater parts of Santa Cruz were also impacted by the flooding event. In the southeast part of Trinidad, several plants also went out of operation. These plants rely heavily on the surface source in areas such as Beach and Petroguaya in the Mayaro area. Tobago has also felt its share of the impact of the weather system. Communities served from plants such as the Hillsborough West plant, the Highlands plant, and the Richmond plant were severely impacted, which resulted in stoppage of their operations. Immediately upon the cease of the rainfall conditions this morning, crews were deployed at several of the water treatment facilities to do an assessment. This assessment entailed looking at the river levels, the amount of debris, and clogging of the intake channels. Work started immediately to clear, where possible, some of those intakes so that the plant could resume its operation. We were able earlier this morning to resume operations at a few of the facilities in the northeast area. However, with the continued intermittent rainfall, those facilities subsequently went out of operation again. It is important to note that the impact of any weather system, whether dry season or wet season, will impact significantly on the surface source facilities. These plants, as I've indicated, are stretched throughout north and south, and hence the reason large sections of the population would have felt that impact of no supply. I would like to share with you some of the reasons why the plant would have had to be shut down during these instances. When we experience heavy rainfall, it would result in the river levels becoming extremely high, turbulent conditions. This turbidity or flooded rivers will cause clogging of our intake screens. It means that we could encounter significant damage to our pumps, our intake raw water pumps, if we were to continue operation. As such, these pumps must be taken out of operation to allow river conditions to settle and then resume once we have proper conditions that will establish operation. The debris also possess threats to our treatment process and could compromise water quality. As such, it is extremely important for conditions to be monitored, and once the appropriate conditions are met, the operations resume. We at WASA have looked at several sources of supply to mitigate and several actions to mitigate against surface source and groundwater. Several communities we have looked at introducing groundwater potential, and this is ongoing as we embark on several regional projects throughout Trinidad and Tobago in the near future. This will not only add to our reliance on the groundwater source, but also look at refurbishment of the existing surface source facilities. Some of the works that are planned include refurbishment of the intakes, refurbishment of the treatment process on the plant to be able to better treat the supply and meet with the challenges of the river source. WASA has taken several steps in preparing for this event. We have taken proactive measures in order to ensure that we minimize the disruption to persons. Some of these steps taken included an advisory was issued prior to the onset of the weather event to encourage customers to conserve water. We had ensured that all storage reservoirs were filled to capacity and maintained as much schedules prior to the onset of the first rainfall. Production sources were increased where applicable in areas such as the Hollis water treatment plant to enable that source to supply some of the surrounding communities that would have been affected by plants that went out of operation, so that where distribution or redistribution of supply could have been done, this was done in the northeast area. Water trucking had been increased and expanded throughout Trinidad and Tobago to allow for some supply through this service. However, I wish to maintain that the critical focus was on the institutions such as hospitals and schools and the community centers where we knew were critical to the operations. WASA's command center was established very early on yesterday, and several means for communication was fostered through our 800-4420 truckborne request services, through our live chat at www.wasa.gov.tt, through our WhatsApp messaging at 709-7793. So all these communication means was put into immediate effect in an attempt to ensure that persons could reach out to the authority to engage the services. The authority will also be seeking in the future to look at some mitigating initiatives. Some of these and of priority will be the redesigning of the intakes where applicable, installation of additional storage reservoir to buffer supplies, increasing groundwater supply in areas where possible, as I've mentioned, and very importantly, in conjunction with the Water Resources Agency and Adapa River, to look at protection of the watershed. These are extremely critical as we plan the future and mitigate around instances where we would encounter weather systems such as these. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Shaira. Ladies and gentlemen, I will now move to the question and answer section of this update. As always, the rules of engagement are that you raise your hand, identify yourself and the media house you represent, ask two questions, which we will answer, and if time permits, we will go back for a further round of questions. Okay? If Master Control could put the screen up. I think we can start with Ian Wayson. Ian, are you hearing us? Master Control, if you're, are there anybody else? I can't see the screen. Akash, you are up on screen, so let's go to you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Akash Samra, CNC3. My first question, the pipe-borne water that the public is getting now, what's the quality of that water, and what advice do you have for the public with regard to consumption right now, so the water they're getting right now?
Sure. Pipe-borne water. Quality of pipe-borne water. Put it on. Let's press it, yeah.
We ensure through vigorous testing regimes that the water quality that leaves all of our treatment facilities are within standard. We have adopted and maintained regulatory compliance through the World Health Organization, so that all sources of water produced by WASA are safe.
Okay, and for my second question, actually, Ms. Ali, could you explain with a bit more detail the initiative to increase that groundwater supply and how this will mitigate a recurrence of what we're going through right now?
Yes, definitely. Groundwater is more resilient to the weather changes. It requires less treatment, and it's available at several aquifers. Of course, due diligence and research into the different aquifers must be established before we can determine the exact quantities that can be abstracted. That is one part of it. In addition, groundwater, because of its lesser treatment required and its resilience to supply community, We have been looking at several areas in the northeast Trinidad, in the northwest area, and even in the deeper south areas in southwest, where we could harness the aquifers and introduce additional groundwater supply.
Thank you very much. Ian Mason, are you prepared now?
Hello, are you hearing me? Are you hearing me?
Ian, we can't hear you. Let's move on to Jule Brown. Jule?
Good afternoon. Question to the either minister at the table. In terms of the management of the state's preparedness for what at the time had been identified by the Met Service as the pending passage of a potential storm, have you all done an assessment to determine whether everything was done as the government would have liked? Are there any areas of concern that the government would want to address, or are you satisfied with the overall response yesterday? That's the first question.
So, Jule, maybe I could answer first, and I'm sure Minister Gonzalez may want to add to it. That process was an ongoing one, and it continues to be an ongoing one. We don't see ourselves as being out of it as yet. So while we are conducting updates like this, we are still collating all the information that we have. I don't know if anyone else has seen the Minister of Rural Development and the Minister of Works would have been on the ground today down in Penal Bay Regional Corporation, still assessing. So we are seeing it. We are still experiencing bad weather. The worst of the weather system has passed us, but we are still experiencing it. So that sort of post-mortem will continue, because this is not a one-off. We're in a hurricane season. So this will be the standard operating procedure going forward. I don't know if Marvin, if you'd want to add anything.
I think you've captured it fully. We've leveled with the population. We've had several news conferences and releases, especially from the utility sector, the ODPM, and we have triggered our emergency system to be able to prepare the country for this impending adverse weather conditions. In previous news conferences, I would have hinted to the population that there are areas that depend on surface water sources are likely and will be impacted by any extreme weather conditions. And as I've explained on numerous occasions, it in fact occurred. And what we are doing here is responding and leveling with the population as to what we are doing. Those plans that have been impacted severely, and you would have heard from the operations director as well as the CEO, the mitigating measures that they have put in place to be able to address the issues, and to let you all know that those stations and plants, they depend on surface water, rivers, etc. And it is until we get an improvement in our weather conditions at this point in time and the improvement in the water quality that those plants will resume operation. So by and large, I believe the level of preparation that went into this adverse weather situation, I believe the government has done tremendously well. The population has responded quite positively, and we continue to make our assessments post. But we are not out of it as yet. The severe weather is still with us, and that is the reason why we are here today, leveling with the population, responding to the population, communicating with the population, the impacts that we are feeling around the country, and what we are doing to address it.
My second question, very quickly, the post-mortem, as you had identified it, would that include an assessment of the Met Service in terms of whether it has all that it needs, resources and so on, to do its job?
So thank you for that question, Joel, because the operations of the Meteorological Services Division of the Ministry of Public Utilities has been under my radar for over a year. And that is the reason why in the midterm review, we've gotten an allocation from the Ministry of Finance for the Met Services Division in Trinidad at PRCO to acquire its own GO 16 system. So that is presently in procurement, and that will help increase the capacity of the Met Services in order to allow it to provide timely advice and to allow customers to be able to interact with the Meteorological Services Division in real time, so that it can share some of its information to the population in real time. So it has been, it continues to be under our radar. It continues to be under our great and intense focus. And even moving forward into the new year, the new financial year that is, we continue to look at its operation and to provide it with all the necessary modern resources and equipment so that it can discharge its duties to the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
Ian Mason, moving back to you now.
Hello?
Yes.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, we are.
Fine. Very good. Thank you very much. I know Ms. Ali would have mentioned earlier about redesigning the intakes and what and not what. But I wanted to find out if currently if there is any kind of filter system at place in at the intakes that would filter out some of the debris and things like that. Because what you are saying is that when there is no rain, Wassa crying. When there's plenty rain, Wassa is also crying. So is there a filter system in place?
Yes, there are several screening systems currently at all of our surface source intakes. And actually, there are multiple screens. We have a primary screening system, a secondary screening system, and even at the base of the pump, we have another screen to help assist in preventing debris from getting into the pump to damage the impellers. So we do have screening systems. However, even with the most robust of these systems, we would still encounter high siltation, and that will also cause a challenge to operating the pumps.
I also want to add to that, yes, I take the point that when there is no rain, you hear some level of complaints, and when you have too much rain, you have complaints. And as the operations director and the CEO indicated, 16% of the water supplied by Wassa is from surface water sources, but there are other factors that impact upon Wassa's ability to provide the people of Trinidad and Tobago with an efficient and reliable water supply. You will be quite aware that in East Trinidad we have our own challenges there, especially with the issue of deforestation, the issue of illegal quarrying and mining that impact significantly upon the authorities' ability to provide clean and potable water to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Those things are way outside of WASA's capacity to manage, and that's the reason why, as the operations director indicated, we continue to work with our stakeholders, we continue to work with the WRA, the Water Resource Agency, so that we can protect our watershed, so that the authority can provide the people of Trinidad and Tobago with clean and potable water. The issues with respect to desiltation and what have you, these issues are outside of WASA's control, and that's the reason why we continue to implore all our stakeholders, the people who are operating illegal mining, the people who are engaged in illegal deforestation. These things impact upon our water resource, and therefore we need to conduct ourselves in such a way where we protect our environment, and once we do so, the authority will be able to provide the people of Trinidad and Tobago with clean, potable water. And the level of disruption that we have and we continue to experience during these conditions will be minimized if we protect our environment.
Okay, thank you. And the second question, I know the water schedules, where you schedule water during the dry season especially. But what I wanted to find out is that what determines what is the determining factor that one community will get water 5 days a week and one community will get water once a week and things like that? What determines that, where some communities get more water more often than some communities?
Thanks for that question, Ian. I think that's an excellent question, and the public would want to know why that is the situation. We have various reasons. Primarily, it's water rationing in some instances where we have the demand is far surpassing the supply. We would also have issues where we have some shutdown maintenance that we would have to do, and in some instances could extend the schedule. Unfortunately, our customers do experience the negative fallout with regards to that. But I would want to believe that should answer your question in summary.
Okay, if I also may wish to add, and I'll be guided by the two officials of WASA and corrected if there is a need for me to be corrected. But it's a good question because it puts into focus our realities as a country. Schedules are impacted by numerous factors. A lot of our communities, especially in northeast and northwest, are on elevated points. To get water to some of those elevated points, it requires boosters and it requires a lot of pressure. To get the requisite pressure to some of those elevated points, it requires shutting off the water in some areas to get the requisite pressure to some of those points. And in order to do that, you will have to place some communities on a schedule in order to get those higher elevated communities with a water supply. As the CEO also indicated, it is an aspect of water rationing. And that's the reason why we are putting a great focus on increasing WASA's production capacity, increasing localized sources of water so that we can reduce heavy reliance on some of our bigger sources like Hollis, North Oropouche, Caroni, Navet. And we are now putting focus on increasing water production in localized sources. And by so doing, for example, within the Lupino community, we constructed a new water treatment plant. The Lupino community, to some extent, their water supply was 24/3 or 24/2 in some instances. With this new plant that was constructed, the community now has access to 24/7 because this plant increased the volume of production within that community and thereby reducing its reliance on some other sources nearby. So that's the strategy that we are using, but there are a combination of factors that result in water schedules. If you live on a low-lying area, the chances are that your water schedule can be far better than communities that operate on a higher level area because it requires a certain level of operation to get the water to some of those points.
Thank you very much, Minister. Let's move on to Sunalala. Sunal?
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Sonalala, TTT. There's just one question for me to Ms. Ali. I know you would have spoken about some work that started to clear some of the intakes so that the plants could resume operations, and that some of them, with the intermittent rainfall, went out of operation again. Could you say where these facilities are exactly?
Yes, definitely. We had in the northeast area, which is more predominantly the surface source facilities, several of those facilities went out in areas such as the Cora water treatment plant, Lopino de la Pastora plant, the McDavid plant. In the Maracas St. Joseph area, plants such as Akuno and Elanon. In the Matura area, in the Toko area, Tompi. We had other plants going out in the northeastern area such as Arepo and Guanapo and Quarry in Valencia. In the north coast or in northwest Trinidad, they were more impacted in the Blantyshires, Tyrico, La Follette communities. Those plants, those 4 water treatment facilities did go out of operation very early. In the south area, just a few of the facilities were subject to the weather conditions, and this was more so in the Mayari area and in the Beach area. We had in Tobago as well, 3 out of the 8 treatment facilities went out of operation, and those facilities included Hillsborough West, Highlands Road, and Richmond.
Thank you, Shara. So there's just one from you.
Yeah, just have one question for you. Thanks.
Okay, let's move on to Jules Brown again then.
Just wondering, in terms of the issue of why, so for example, in situations where water treatment plants are down, supply is not in operation in areas affected, what about the issue of truck-borne water supply? Of course, when the weather conditions allow for same, is that a priority issue in terms of those areas that are not receiving your normal water supply? That's the first question. And the other one, how does the desalination plant, given the cost for that supply of water, factor into that wider issue of supply and at times like this?
On the issue of the water trucking, the authority engaged very early with our internal and external services to expand the coverage so that several additional water trucks were dispatched at the communities to bridge that gap to provide some relief or some level of service to persons who would have been directly impacted and needed that urgent supply. So we did dispatch several trucks throughout Trinidad and Tobago. However, I wish to emphasize that the critical institutions were given priority, meaning the hospitals that were affected, such as the Cora Hospital, the Sandy Grande Hospital. So we ensured that we maintained that level of service so that they would not have been impacted for too long without a supply. We had also focused on the schools and some of the community centers and some of the health centers where maintaining that level of service was extremely critical. So there was water trucking dispatch throughout, and we will continue to do so until the system subsides and we have the plants come back into operation.
Okay, I'll take the second question, which relates to the use of desal water. And Joel, you will understand that desal water, or the issue of desal water in Trinidad and Tobago, is as a result of water sales agreements that the government of Trinidad and Tobago, WASA, would have entered into. So there is a contracted amount of water that is provided to the Water and Sewage Authority by the desal companies, Desalcott in central Trinidad, and then you have Seven Seas in South Trinidad. All right, to increase or to add any demand outside of the water sales agreement, obviously WASA would have to come back to cabinet or the government in order to increase, the current contracted amount or rates that they presently engage with two of these desalination contracts. But the focus rather is to increase and to improve groundwater sources, as the operations director would have indicated, as well as the CEO. Groundwater sources tend to be your most resilient resource at this point in time, because it stands up to seasonal variation, be it wet season conditions or dry season conditions. And that's the reason why we have embarked upon a series of regional plans across Trinidad and Tobago. Recently, we've launched the Northwest plans, and we're moving to Tobago, then Southeast, Central, Southwest, and Southeast, where the focus will be placed on harnessing groundwater sources in order to build that level of resilience within the utility company and reduce our reliance on desal water and or surface water. Desal water is very expensive. In one case, you pay $7, or rather $1 per cubic meter, and it is sold significantly less, especially on the domestic grid. So from a financial perspective, it is certainly not sustainable for the people of Trinidad and Tobago as well as WASA, and therefore our focus at this point in time is to increase the availability of groundwater across the country to build that level of resilience within the distribution and transmission grid.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? No other questions? Okay. Well, I want to thank the members of the media who attended virtually assisting us to get this information out to the general population. I want to thank everyone who has attended this press conference across all our platforms. And as I started off by saying, this is a hurricane season. So even though we are out of the worst weather, we continue to ask you to prepare, to plan, and to communicate. Thank you.
Hurricanes and tropical storms are becoming more frequent for us in the Caribbean. The floods they bring are the #1 cause of weather-related deaths. For those who have disabilities, safety is of particular concern. You can significantly increase your chances of survival